Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast, brought to you by the Michigan Brewers Guild, celebrating 25 years of camaraderie. The Great Beer State Podcast shares the stories of our member breweries and the rich community of Michigan beer and brewing. Listen in, have a beer, and then check out mibeer.com for a full listing of member breweries, events, and more opportunities to explore and support the Great Beer State. Welcome to Season 3 of Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast. I'm here with my good friend Scott. We're kicking it off with an interview in the here and now with Jeff and Gary from Traill Brewing. And we just came off the Great Beer State Conference with Master Brewers Association of America's District Michigan, Michigan State University Extension, and the Michigan Brewers Guild. So Scott's a good time to check in, fresh off the conference. What's on your mind?
Well, present time is late January 2022. So, here we go, starting another year, and things do start fast. So yeah, we just had our in-person conference here a couple weeks ago, which was a great event. It was really interesting to be back together in person in an indoor setting. I think there are some challenges. The timing is a little funny. COVID's not gone, but I think people are ready to, a lot of people anyway, are ready to get out and do some things and try and get back to a more normal schedule. And the conference was evidence of that. We had a nice turnout, probably down somewhat from what it would be in a pre-COVID year. But wrapping up the conference at the Grand Traverse Resort in Acme near Traverse City, it was our January event. And now we're getting ready for an outdoor winter beer festival in February. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing people in the festival environment.
Yeah, and with that being outdoors, which was a decade or more ahead of the trend to eat and drink outdoors in February, well ahead of the curve, but it feels like that has some insulation. Things still get canceled here and there for various reasons, and it seems like with the Winter Beer Fest being outdoors, that has a little more likelihood of being free from that sort of reschedule. I want to knock on wood or something, but just a reminder that it's outdoors, and so that's going to really create a safer environment.
Yeah, and it's fun to be outside drinking a beer and hanging around with friends in the middle of winter.
Yeah. So anything the listening public need to know about that? Tickets are on sale. Any other prepare ahead sort of suggestions on how to get themselves to the Winter Beer Fest?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. Tickets are on sale and available. This podcast is obviously pre-recorded, but I anticipate we'll be selling tickets right up until near the festival. There have been years when tickets sold out rapidly and were unavailable. I think that they're going to be quite available this year, so I encourage people to get them. I don't know if we'll have any available for sale at the gate. We do plan on a certain number of tickets. I wouldn't wait till the day of, but I would go ahead and get your friends together and get some tickets, and you find those at mibeer.com at our website.
And that's Saturday, February 26th from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Yes, unless you're an enthusiast member, which is the Insiders Club, and you kind of get a VIP treatment where you get to get in an hour before the general public when things aren't quite as busy. So enthusiast membership information can still get you linked up with that. And that's also at the website at mibeer.com. So yeah, Saturday, February 26th, annual Winter Beer Festival at what is now LMCU Ballpark in Comstock Park, Michigan.
Nice. And did I see that either brewery or beer list has gone up, or is that going up?
Brewery beer list is up. Probably by the time we post the podcast, the beer list will be up as well. So we're working right through the process. We got a really good turnout of breweries, and things are looking good.
Terrific. what else? Any other updates, or should we jump into introducing Jeff and Gary?
Yeah, I think that's news from my quarter. I really enjoyed listening to the interview with Jeff and Gary. It's Gary Evans and Jeff Knoblock. I think I realized at the conference that I may do a mistreatment on his last name, so I'll get that from Jeff next time I talk to him. If you're listening, feel free to point that out when we see each other again. But yeah, it's another one of these interesting stories. It's a kind of a collaboration or partnership. The two of them run the operation, and they both come from a brewing background, homebrewing background. They got to know each other as part of a homebrewers club, and I think that Gary is primarily in the brewery, and I know Jeff is running all the outside sales and that end of the business. They do quite a bit of self-distribution. They've spent a lot of time and energy focusing on that. And Jeff is certainly the face of that end of things, but he comes at it from a passion for home brewing and beer and brewing. And so it's another one of those stories that is a recurring theme.
Yeah, it is a recurring theme. It's one of the like probably three primary sort of germination centers for breweries is well, and the Homebrew Club is sort of an interesting wrinkle to this story, meaning it's not just a home brewer who then said, I want to turn this into a brewery. It's, brewers that met via a Homebrew Club. And so I think this story is an illustration of what I've observed over the years as well. And this is just a great example and version of it, is that the homebrewing community has its own characteristics adjacent to and related to the micro brewing or craft brewing or beer communities. So like, I just think there's some interesting differences, and that the homebrewing communities continued to grow, continued to thrive, and continue to be its own thing, even though it has a lot of similarities to the craft beer community right next to it. And I think these guys really showcase that. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions as you hear the story. But I think it's a reminder. My little shout out here is that it's a reminder of how much the craft. I'm kind of being careful with my words here because I don't want it to sound like an obligation or anything, but it's a shout out to how much the craft beer community has gained and drawn from the homebrewing community, which was early. It's often early in trends, and it sort of has its own pulse to it. And a lot of those values and a lot of the things that we hold dear and see as normal in the craft beer community, a lot of those are born in the homebrewing community.
Yep. And I guess it really makes me think even one step back further, that I think those homebrew clubs in a lot of cases were spawned by where you could get ingredients. In this case, it goes back to Siciliano's and Steve Siciliano again, right? I mean, I think Gary mentioned that he had been buying raw materials and had become friends with Steve, and Steve was, hey, there's this Muskegon, Ottawa Homebrewers Club. You probably ought to go get involved with that and share what you know and learn from them. So it comes, back to, where can I even get these materials in the early days? And that led to people getting together and sharing and building community. But again, it starts around a bag of grain and a bag of hops, and probably a conversation of what you're using for yeast.
Yeah. And I think, in addition to or next to that is that if you go back to the 80s, which Gary does, and so many stories, and maybe even the 70s, and so many stories from the rising tide, we had several origin stories that go really back to when homebrewing was the underground thing. And it predated the expectation that it would have an impact on the market. And those people's, their appetite to get beer of flavor, their willingness to say, well, if I can't get fresh beer with this style or this character, then I'll make it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to have to make it.
Yeah, that desire to go find it, to go create it, to make it happen is really shown up over the last several decades as like that's part of the beer fan that doesn't brew, who's going to go travel to get a special beer release from their favorite brewery, or stand in line, or prepare for a beer festival with the program and circle the beers they want to try. A lot of those things show up in different ways. That willingness to explore and care about the specifics is shown in the homebrewers for a long time, and I thought these guys really I was just finding myself smiling and enjoying the story and saying, yeah, all right, here it is.
Yep, agreed. And Gary brought that back home to Trail Point Brewing Company too, when he mentioned really connecting with consumers. And there is this magnetism of beer and sharing a beer in the community that it creates. And here it is at the homebrew supply store, a group of home brewers, and then right at the brewery where they can talk to the folks that are making the beer, and the people serving the beer are very involved, and the equipment's right there. And some days I can smell what's going on back there and see it and hear it and be connected to it.
Yeah. So another great example of learning more every time we talk to the passionate people in the breweries of Michigan that make our guild and our community so great. So unless you got anything else to add, I think we can hand it off to Jeff and Gary at Trail Point Brewing in Allendale.
Cheers to Jeff and Gary.
Jeff and Gary, welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast. Great to be here with you virtually today, sharing beers nonetheless.
Great to be here too, Fred. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Look forward to a new 2022 here.
Yeah, let's hope. So it's been a long slog through, a pandemic beer market, and I'd love to hear about how you guys have adjusted and made it through that. But I want to start earlier than that and just hear how Trail Point came to be. Maybe how your partnership evolved. How did this all get started?
We were there was the three of us originally, my son Jeff and myself, and we were part of the Muskegon Ottawa Brewers Association. Just home brewers hanging out and brewing different beers. And we got chatting one day, and it felt like a good fit for the three of us. We kind of interviewed each other. Some of the other breweries that came out of there, Pigeon Hill and Grand Armory, and some of those guys were encouraging us right along to, say, you guys make some pretty good beer. You should really consider doing this. And we got together and got it going. That's all there's to it.
Awesome. And what year did you say, what would you think the time was, and what year was it between like, hey, we ought to maybe think about a brewery and Trail Point existing in the world?
Probably, you already had some thoughts of it, and I had my own thoughts of it, and we kind of brought it together. So, we opened up in 2015. Personally, myself, I was already had the concept in my mind, probably 2012-ish, somewhere in there. So
that's about where I started. I was retired out of corporate America. I was just tired of that game, and just brewing on the side a couple days a week in my little brew house that I had on my place. And I'd been working on finding a place in the right location for a couple of years before the three of us got together.
Let's be honest, it took us 3 years to talk our wives into it.
I can believe it. That seems like a short period of time. Can you remember what brought you to the Homebrew Club in the first place, or even what was the original seed to, hey, I ought to give this homebrewing thing a try? Like either one of those stories, but I just love to kind of hear how you ended up in the same room before the brainstorming started.
I guess my side of it is, I don't know what your first meeting from the mob was. I was sitting at odd sides having a beer, and I was already dabbling in brewing for a few years then. And the bartender said, there's a homebrewers meeting here on Sunday and you want to join in? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So it was kind of an easy invitation, and I brought some beer, and it was one of my first beers that I actually tried to brew, aside from probably Red's Rye, was Outside Citra Pale Ale. And so I brought some of that. I probably had that in my keg at home, and so I brought some of that with me. So that was kind of my invitation to the Homebrewing Club.
I was buying bags of grain from Siciliano's
Oh yeah.
and brewing quite a bit. And I had been brewing since 1985, and Steve and Barb, good people and good friends of ours, they said, boy, Gary, you ought to join a club. It'd be fun, and you can learn some stuff and maybe share some other things with some other guys. And they suggested that we get into the mob, and we did, and had a great time doing it.
Yeah, so that's a long time brewing, and things looked a lot different in 1985.
They did.
Having brewed a couple batches in the Chicago area, maybe 4 or 5 years after that, I still have very surreal memories of it. Just felt very underground, even finding the homebrew shop, let alone the ingredients. And so that brings me to a question of with your combined homebrew roots, I feel like the homebrew community is a really robust beer community, and it has a lot of similarities and overlap to the craft brewing community. But there are differences in terms of whether it's regular beer aficionados that are out there, drinking beer and looking for beers, whether it's commercial brewers, and then you have the homebrewing clubs. Now that you've spent some time sort of in each and traversing the differences, what would you say are hallmarks of the homebrewing community that maybe the other groups of people don't necessarily know about, the commercial brewers and the regular beer fans? What makes the homebrewing communities unique?
I think there's a real sense of tight community. You're not in competition with each other, so to speak. Commercial, we are probably the best of any industry out there as far as working together and sharing, quote, secrets. But there's a real camaraderie in the Homebrew Club, and sharing and coming up with some different wild ideas and really encouraging each other to brew different beers.
Do you think that's a little bit where the commercial craft brewing community, where those roots are born? That is there a lot of camaraderie in the professional industry because there's so many home brewers that came up in this, we're both makers just trying to make beer and enjoy each other's beer background?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely say that.
There's not a week that goes by that we aren't in contact with another brewery, either us asking them questions or them asking us questions about different issues in the brew house that we need to help each other get through.
Yeah, that's great. And what were some of the big surprises when or changes or shifts or anything that was really different than maybe you expected, or different than when you're a home brewer? Once you open your doors, you're now, you've gone pro, whatever the saying is. What are the things that changed or surprised you?
That's a good question, Jeff.
Pressure. I think it really is. It's more pressure to, where you could fool around, and you can have little inconsistencies now, but you have to be precise, and there can't be your name's on the line. You can still take chances, and that's I think what every brewer does. And but at the end of the day, the beer's got to be the same as it was before. The quality's got to be there. You've got to do your diagnostics work. I'm sure we were drinking tons of Brettanomyces and PDO and not even knowing it back in the day. And you can't, especially if you're packaging, and you can't take any chances, and you got to put the legwork into, and along with the resources to do it. stuff that we've kind of had to really learn quickly. It was easy back in the day with your little bottle crimper and your Blickman filling wand to throw a few bottles in the cellar, and it's not the same anymore. But it's still the same amount of fun, but obviously in a larger scale.
Yeah, when you say that, it makes me think of a couple of things. Not only is the risk bigger in terms of, like you mentioned, your name's on the line, but also the environment that beer is going to need to make it through is different. It's leaving your cellar, so you're not going to know where it is. You're not going to know how long it's in the bottle. You're not going to know if it's showing signs of heading down a path, because it's no longer it's not in your basement.
Yeah, where's my baby?
And so, homebrew, I guess, depending on the style, you're just not necessarily having to protect it from travel and environment and all that stuff that might happen to it. So, because if you're drinking one bottle out of a case of your homebrew and you realize it's at the tail end of what its shelf life ought to be, you can either drink it real fast or ditch it.
Right.
But if that's happening 2 towns away, you don't know about it.
Right.
Absolutely.
That raises the stakes in a hurry.
Yeah, homebrew clubs, they would drink just about anything you brew and say, hey, this is a great beer. But commercially, we have a full-fledged lab that we test every single beer, and we make sure that it's complete and it's going to taste the same every single time unless we decide to make a difference to it.
Yeah.
Home brewing, you're not really worried about that too much. But here we are, because it's got to be stable on that shelf for a good period of time. And people want to, you might get some person that's first time they ever tried that beer, and it's got to be stellar every time.
Yeah. And right. And even if it's the first time you're brewing it, you still want it to be intentional. But then you bring up the other point, which is that replicating a beer is a different art than, writing new recipes and just being able to brew well. It's can I deliver that beer again and again? Can my systems recreate that beer consistently and reliably?
We have a beer like that, right?
What?
Wiley.
Wiley? Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a stuck mash for a stout one time, so we ended up with a nice black ale, and we've never been really able to recreate it since.
Yep. So as you said, there were 3 of you at the beginning, and you all had brewing experience, I guess. And I'm wondering, how did you go about figuring out maybe what your collective shared vision for what you wanted the brewery to be, what beers you wanted to make? I guess along the way, you can also share what that vision is. But I'm just curious, with 3 different brewing points of view, how did you decide what the Traill point of view is going to be?
That's a good question.
I mean, personally, I think it all started with the beer, good, clean, quality beer. And I think we all had that intention. And as far as the minor details, and, I think it's part of that question is still work in progress, Fred. I mean, we have a vision of, where we want to go, but it's, market trends, market changes. I think there's a lot of factors that still fall into that you have to be, go through a pandemic. You have to be able to pivot. And things have to change. And then I think, people's palates have evolved and beer has gotten better, and people's standards have gotten higher. And I think it's kind of a conglomerate of everything, personally.
Sure. We had a repertoire of recipes that each of us had, and both had our strengths in various different areas, and we just pulled the best of the best out of those repertoires, and that's what we started with. And we continued to lock into each other's knowledge and saying, hey, let's consider getting this beer and put it on tap, and it goes through a big R&D process, and then eventually it makes it to the tap room. But it's a constant collaboration between us to get the right schedule up on the board.
And so did you have areas of focus in terms of styles or, influencing origins of beer, like certain countries of origin, or were you more along the lines of all beer is fair game and let's make great beer and see what happens next?
I think all beers were fair game. Jeff, I think he primarily focused on pale ales and India pale ales, IPAs. more so. And because of my background, what got me started in the home brewing market, I was more into lagers, English style, hefty ales, Scotch ales, and those type of beers. And our other partner liked stouts and dark beers. So it kind of played real well into a full repertoire of beers on the shelf.
Nice. And so I understand that you've got a robust pub business and you're also sold in the trade. Can you talk a little bit about when you started, distribute what, your focus on bringing beer outside of the tasting room and what that history or process was like?
That's still a work in progress. It's evolving. Yeah, we still self-distribute. We've grown that every year since we've started, and I think we started that in the fall of 2016, and it was just get a keg out the door to the local restaurant and get your beer out there. That was our form of marketing, and it still is in a sense that way. I mean, that we love going to the guild events and the festivals and getting in front of people that can't come to Allendale. Who knows, for whatever reason, but I think that's gonna continue to be some work ahead of all breweries personally is marketing and getting your beer out there and getting in front of people, getting yourself out there, telling about your business and telling about your brewery, telling your story.
Yeah.
Now we distribute quite a bit, but it's still in the large scale of things. We're just a dot, a blip per se. But I think we encompass a lot of West Michigan here and try to get our name out there. And we always joke around a little bit about people that live locally that asked us when did we open. Well, 6 years ago. And I think it takes time, and we're surrounded by these beautiful breweries around us that we were all, jealous of when we were home brewers, the Founders and the Bells and the Shorts and the Bavants and New Holland and, all these breweries that have been around for 30 years. And it's really, I guess it's that you sometimes got to stop, I think, and tell yourself that these places have been around for a long period of time. And I think that's part of it.
They all face those same realizations of, I didn't know there was a brewery here. I can tell you from experience, everybody got that at some point and still probably do. You also cracked me up because I used to say, I think I said it both in the beer side, but certainly when we started distilling in 2005, I remember using the phrase a lot that we're a speck trying to grow into a dot. Put it into perspective.
Cheers to becoming a dot.
Yeah.
Cheers
to it. So I also imagine, there's a different reality in terms of what beers you want to bring out. And in the tasting room, it's your environment, it's all your beers. You're gonna cover the gamut in terms of whatever you have style wise and strength and color wise on your lineup. Out in the trade, are there particular beers that seem to be what the community is getting to know you for outside of your tasting room? Is it a smattering? Is it a little bit of everything? Or are there certain beers that are really representing you out and about?
I think we try to, kind of one of our MOs has always been, we try to brew something for everyone. So we try to replicate that. And would you agree that we try to replicate some of that outside of the tap room as well? Obviously our IPAs, that's what we brew the most of out there on the shelf as far as distribution goes. And the market trends are showing that they are still the highest selling beers out there. But we try to, are you drinking Bummer Wally?
I am. Yep.
Gary's drinking a black walnut brown ale. We just put an awesome Scottish export on tap last week. We try to, some of these beer styles to educate people on what these beers are and try to get it out there. I think we try to cover a little bit of everything from, a kettle sour to some of these styles that that people aren't familiar with here. It's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. And so part of my question there is that any of those maybe lesser known styles, those can end up in the trade and accounts besides your tasting room just as likely as some of the more popular or known styles like IPAs could. Either one of those can end up.
We have our core core beers out there, and usually it's our tap room is a little bit of a guinea pig. Whatever is the top sellers here is what ends up in cans or ends up in distribution. You know, we originally started out like most breweries, we just wanted to deal with only the pub. We didn't want to get it big into distribution, just the community and deal with that situation. So, COVID kind of pushed us into, without tap room, we got to make money somewhere. So we ended up purchasing a canning line and putting things in cans, and it's basically what the market's going to be best bearing for that particular unit out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you're able to do that. And that had to be a challenging time.
And we never thought in the beginning how hard it was going to be to make a beer hazy.
another surprise. So going back to sort of a sense of community a little bit, since Traill Point was really emerged from the mob homebrewing club, and you guys already expressed sort of an awareness and a sense of camaraderie in the community. Do either of you have a recollection of kind of when you first became aware of the Michigan Brewers Guild, or I guess that's the first question, is when did you first become aware of the Brewers Guild? What was your first experience?
First experience was the Winter Beer Fest. We saw that coming up and said, we really need to be a part of this. This is 10 miles from our brewery. There's a lot of people going there. Let's get connected with these people. Besides that, there's going to be a lot of brewers there that know a whole lot more about brewing than I do. And let's share some things and learn some things from these folks.
Had you been to a guild festival prior to opening Traill Point?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, I have as well. I learned that you can't taste them all.
It's a good lesson. You can try. So I guess, going back, I don't mean to spend too much time on it, but I really appreciate sort of your vantage point of this is similar to that early question of what's the difference between the community, but as this project is part of one that's documenting the history of the guild, the history of Michigan brewing, and we talk a lot about how what are the distinctions that make the Michigan brewing scene unique. So whether it's the scene, the community, or the guild, I just wonder, as you've made your way through this professionally now, what do you think stands out as a hallmark of the Michigan professional brewing community and or the guild?
Guys like yourself, Fred, the passion, Michigan beer. I think it's, I lived in different parts of the country, from Colorado to the East Coast, and there's just this tight knit community here, that this passion. And I think that, you probably don't remember, I met you probably 15 years ago at an event at the Salt of the Earth. There was a tasting there. Maybe it wasn't that long ago. Between maybe 10 years ago or so. I think that Michigan beer is just, the passion, yourself, Scott Graham, and the staff, Sherry, in these events that get put on, and the promotions of beer, what we've seen come across the state, breweries, and there's nothing more satisfying to me, is even if you go to your local bottle shop and you're pulling a beer off the shelf that's a week old, and that's incredible to me. It's the history. The history is awesome, and I think it's only going to even get better as we move forward and progress.
Yeah, Gary, do you have any thoughts on what what the distinct personality traits of the Michigan professional scene is compared to around the country or world?
I've traveled the country a lot. That was kind of after I was retired and before we started this. My wife and I, as a hobby, we went to the East Coast and then we went to the West Coast, and we drove, and we would stop at all the different communities and try all the different beers and get a good, just because we just enjoyed doing it. Anywhere from Dogfish Head to, all the breweries in up by New Berlin and Colorado and that area. But it seems to have Michigan we seem to have claimed on to beer, where we've lost the automotive market in Michigan for the most part, and we've lost the furniture industry in Western Michigan for the most part. It's getting shipped out, but beer is still homegrown. It's still here. It's still us. They can see us make it right on tap. They can talk to the owners. They can be part of the whole brewery scene that totally has dominated, I think, the commercial market in Michigan, where the other markets have kind of moved out to foreign shores in different states and things of those natures. We're still homegrown in us and about just plain Michigan.
Yeah, I like it. So tell me a little bit about what your overall area, Allendale area, was like brewery wise prior to Traill Point. What your little, whatever you describe your region as now, what it's like currently, and maybe what you're hoping to see brewery wise in the area looking ahead.
Well, for the most part, I mean, we're in Allendale. It's kind of our name kind of, I mean, if you want to get back into the whereabouts of our name, and it was kind of a Traill Point, what it means. It was so we tried to put something together that would represent this community, and like we came up with the Allendale is really here because of the Grand River, and it was a crossing point. And then we discovered trail marker trees or Native American marker trees. And it turns out there's a few of them west of here, and they were directional markers of a direction to go or a meeting place. And, that kind of really describes Allendale. It's a community. I guess since our inception, we've seen other breweries, Coopersville, come close to us. So, I guess those statistics, what you see out there you can find a brewery within 10 miles of wherever you're at is kind of becoming very true. There's probably room for another brewery here. Whether that's going to happen or not, I'm not sure, but
I'm not sure about that. Allendale's pretty small. It's strung out over a lot of long period of places. But Coopersville's 10 miles away, Hudsonville, Pike 51, they're 10 miles away. So we've got a pretty good nucleus of breweries in this area. And then of course, Grand Haven's 20 miles away, and can't forget Grand Rapids and Founders and where it all began down there. So.
And what was the reception like when you opened, being the first brewery in town, specifically, even though it wasn't too far away from other breweries? What was the reception like once you started opening taps in Allendale?
It was pretty amazing. We went to the first Allendale charter board meeting, and I was nervous because for the longest time, Allendale was a dry community. They didn't want anything. And we presented our case and what we were planning to do. And one of the board members said, "It's about damn time." And knew, yeah, it was a relief, but we knew how acceptance was going to be. And it was pretty exciting when we opened those doors the first time, to see them lined up all the way through the parking lot. Just couldn't wait to get in to try the beer.
And as humbling as it was that we, sold out of our mug membership before we opened, and the community was willing to take the risk and the chance on us without even tasting our beer was very humbling.
Yeah, that's terrific.
That's for sure.
Well, I think it's a good time to head into the last call questions. These are things we've been asking everybody through these pandemic interviews. you kind of addressed it already a little bit with the shift into distribution and canning line and canned beer, but how else has the pandemic and all the related regulations, how has it affected your overall outlook and your business?
I don't know if it affected our outlook. Our outlook remains the same. I think our community is much like most communities, except that we're probably a little more on the conservative side of things over here. And COVID was a difficult time. People just didn't understand that it's not us, it's the rules we have to follow. Put your mask on, please, blah, blah, blah. And it has been a divisive situation in this community, much like many communities throughout the United States and through Michigan. And we still try to navigate to a spot where this is community. Check your stuff at the door. If you want to talk about beer, let's talk about beer, but let's not talk about all the rest of the stuff. Let's just talk about beer and coming together and having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose that was a big test to that idea of, just that whole arena. Got a lot of exercise through that time. Very difficult.
But throughout the whole event, Fred, it really, our community stepped up and they did support us. They came out here, they sat in the cold, and when we could open the doors, when we had igloos, and it was very humbling to see people were donating firewood and gift cards for propane tanks, and it was quite humbling to see what the community did, and that whole support local push really showed. And I think that was seen in a lot of communities, and it was very heartfelt.
Nice. Glad to hear that. So the next question is, the more you know, what beer style are you most connected to, and what do you wish more people knew about it?
That's a good question. For me, we just did a Scottish export called Combat Cats. I've been a big Scottish ale guy for years and years, and finally got a recipe and a brew that I'm proud of, that we could put it on tap here after all these years. But that's my style. I like that. I don't think people know a lot what that beer is until they try it, and they're like, wow, this is really good. It has some great grainy flavors without being too sweet and not too hoppy, and it's kind of a 6.2% middle of the road. That I think that style is going to grow some with people out there.
Yeah, makes sense. I'll quote a local city official: "It's about time." Sounds like you've been working on that one for a while. How about you, Jeff?
I love the evolution of the IPA. It from sitting on a warm boat in a barrel heading across the ocean to what it's evolved into today, and the excitement of having these new hop varieties come out and new yeast strains that can complement it, and we're doing things with them that and getting flavors out of these hop varietals that we've never seen before. To me, it's just continuous excitement, and I don't think there's going to be any end to that anytime soon. I'm sure the hop growers are dreading that comment, but it's what's new, what's next, and in turn, I think that's part of what some of our customers want. It's what's new, what's next. It's different. They love their brand that they normally drink, and I think we try to really push that, and we want them to drink our core brands, but the excitement of coming up with the evolution of the IPA or some hoppy stuff and it might not always be hoppy. So I think it's an acquired kind of.
That's the strange part of the evolution.
Yes.
It's like, well,
Very strange part.
So any tips for the people drinking at home? This has changed a little bit now. We're a little farther down, although here in the winter, I think that, there's still a lot of staying home, isolating, bringing beer and food home. And the question is tips for serving beer at home for yourself or for friends. Anything for the ideal home bar that you think people should prioritize? It's always tricky asking people who are standing in a bar they can go to that they have the keys to. But
well, I always drink out of snifter glass, because historically beer is too cold coming out of the tap, and you lose a lot of the flavors when that beer is too cold. And I like to just hold it in my hand and warm it up a little bit, and it brings out some more of those caramel notes and some of those other flavors that we as brewers tend to want to make sure that comes through. And people have got too hung up, I think, because of Budweiser serving their beer at minus 29 degrees, that that's what it's supposed to be. But I would say get yourself a good tulip glass, warm it up a little bit. My refrigerator at home's at 45 degrees for my beer.
Nice.
My neighbor used to set his old Milwaukee next to the exhaust on his tractor.
For
I
the,
would
for the
say-
aroma or the temperature?
That's right, the aroma. My advice would be, I'm gonna have an outdoorsman, so if people that are staying home, I would say get outside. Everybody's canning their beer. Take it with you.
All right.
Enjoy the outdoors.
Move the bar outdoors. Love and hate. What current trends do you either love or hate? You guys can choose which one you pick and whether you both answer, but what do you either love or hate, and how is that reflected or not in your brewery?
That's an on the spot question, Fred.
That's right. You can choose love, you can choose hate, you can choose both.
I guess I like how, I guess, I'm not gonna say I love it, but I think that, with the evolution of, I'm kind of got my foot in my mouth, but breweries are making seltzers, right? Let's all be honest. So I think that I love it from the aspect of people never came out to breweries before, that we now have something aside from a cider, or we're serving something else that your significant other can join you at the brewery and experience that feel here. So I think that opens up
Yeah, and especially for a micro where you don't have a Class C license, you can't bring in other stuff.
right.
Do you have any wine or anything else in house?
Cider.
Cider.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see where seltzer really opens things up a lot there.
Yeah, and obviously there's been a big change in trends with spirits and craft cocktails, and you're seeing breweries that are getting distilling license now. And I think that it's taken away a little bit from beer, but it's getting them closer to beer actually at the same time. So maybe if they weren't up to trying it before, they will try it now. So
How about you, Gary?
I think I'll pick on hate. One of the things that I hate to see, and I understand it has to happen, but I like the small local breweries, and I surely have hated seeing the trend of so many breweries get purchased and picked up over and over. I mean, Bell's broke my heart. I know he had to do it, and it was a good financial and business decision. But I'm 67 years old. I'm still plugging along, and I just don't want to see that. I don't want to have Michigan lose that feel of the local brewery and brew pub.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, next up is first drink, worst drink. So since we're a duo here, we'll just say you can either choose one or mention both, but we're looking for either your first alcoholic sip or your worst drink. Sometimes there's a correlation, or the worst alcoholic drink you can remember. First and or worst drinks.
First alcoholic. I was always a beer drinker. I never had to acquire a taste for it. My first one was genuine Stroh's. Even did a tour of the brewery back in the day. Even my wife and I went there on our honeymoon. So that's my first memory of a beer. It was Stroh's beer. And now they've left and they've changed it a lot, but it's not what craft beer is today, that's for sure. But that was the first drink.
You remember your worst?
No, I don't.
That's a charmed life. It didn't leave a mark.
I mean, I'm sure there have been a few as I traveled across the country that were, boy, I can't drink that one anymore. But I don't remember it.
Perfect. Jeff?
wow. I'm gonna have to say the same with the worst. I don't know if I have a worst.
That's good news.
Yeah, probably the first beer I've ever had was probably with my dad's uncle. He gave me a old Milwaukee and a dip of Skull at the same time. So maybe that was the worst that I've had.
It started out pretty good. It may not have finished.
That was
well.
hardcore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents weren't beer drinkers as a child, and I guess I strayed from the nest and kind of did my own chasing with that. But I was always a beer drinker. Maybe I'll admit maybe it was something yellow and fizzy and light, but it's really evolved to something beautiful.
Nice. So story time is next, and this one can be tough to be put on the spot, but maybe with two people and beers, it's easier. The question is really, do you have any go-to funny stories from the world of Michigan beer and Michigan breweries, things you find yourself telling over and over again and cracks you up every time, from the personalities you've gotten to meet either in your brewery or out and about?
I don't have anything that just I can
That's a tough one, Fred.
think of.
Yeah. Any classic, usually they're born out of some sort of failure. So classic beer fest failure or post fest wipeout are usually where these get drawn from.
Drinking too much at an event probably is you laugh about it now, but it wasn't, or you were laughing about it at the time, I think. But yeah, learning that those little 3-ounce pours will catch up with you. Funny stories in here.
Let's see.
We're serious here, Fred.
All right. Well, no problem. If it comes up, you bring it on back.
Okay.
I'll let you ponder this last one. We're at the finish line. Who is a bucket list drinking companion? They can be alive or dead. Somebody who you have not yet had a beer with, but that you'd like to.
Wow, I've had beers with a lot of folks. Gordon, I had a beer with Gordon Strong one day, and it was an amazing experience.
I think personally, like he spoke at one of the guild events, Jim Koch from Sam Adams,
Oh yeah.
He was a wonderful speaker, and he really moved me, and I'll never forget that speech. And I would love the opportunity to sit down with him one day and have a beer, and maybe Sam could join me.
All right.
And my grandfather, Henry Lee, who we've named a beer after, as English Strong Ale, he used to brew beer during the Depression and Prohibition just to make a few extra bucks. And I dearly love to sit down and have a beer with him.
Awesome.
All right. Well, one way or another, we hope that happens for all three of them. Gentlemen, I appreciate the work you've done to put Traill Point Brewing and your beautiful beers into the world. Look forward to sharing some again very soon. Thanks for spending time with us here on the show, and cheers.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
We
Cheers.
invite
Great
you
beer state.
to come on down here and have a beer with us.
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening, watching, and sharing Michigan's Great Beer State podcast, supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. Interviews featured here have been included in the book A Rising Tide, Stories of the Michigan Brewers Guild. They'll also be in the Great Beer State documentary coming out in July of 2022. Visit mibeer.com for brewery information, beer festivals, and 25th anniversary celebrations. We appreciate the support and encourage you to like, subscribe, and give us a review. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer. Cheers.